Most wars drag on for years, some for decades. A few reshape the map of the world for generations. But one war lasted less time than your average lunch break. On August 27, 1896, two nations went to war. By the time some people had finished their morning tea, it was over. This is the story of the shortest war in recorded history, the Anglo-Zanzibar War, and why it ended in just 38 minutes. To understand how a war can fit inside a coffee break, you have to understand where it happened. Zanzibar wasn't just a tropical island off East Africa. In the late 1800s, it was one of the most valuable ports in the Indian Ocean. It sat along critical trade routes connecting Africa, the Middle East, and India. Cloves, ivory, spices, wealth flowed through its harbor, and where wealth flows, empires follow. By the late 19th century, Britain had turned Zanzibar into a protectorate. That meant Zanzibar still had a sultan, but Britain still held the final authority. The system worked until August 25, 1896. The sitting sultan, Hamad bin Thuwaini, died suddenly, and within hours, his cousin, Khalid bin Bargash, moved into the palace and declared himself the new ruler. There was one problem: he didn't have British approval, and under treaty agreements, no sultan could take power without it. This wasn't just paperwork, it was geopolitical leverage. Britain wasn't going to let a ruler take the throne who might resist its influence or disrupt its trade stability. So, the British consul delivered an ultimatum and commanded that Khalid step down immediately. Khalid refused, and that refusal started a countdown. Now here's where this story becomes astonishing. Khalid barricaded himself inside the palace complex. He gathered roughly 2,800 men, palace guards, supporters, and a few artillery pieces. On paper, that sounds respectable, but look at what he was facing. In the harbor sat 5 British warships with modern steel hulls, naval artillery, and thousands of trained sailors and marines. If Khalid's forces were a stone wall, then the British fleet was a sledgehammer, and Britain wasn't bluffing. The British delivered a final warning for Khalid to surrender by 9 a.m. When the clock struck 9 o'clock and no surrender came, the British ships opened fire. What happened next was not a battle in the traditional sense. It was an overwhelming demonstration of force. Within minutes, shells tore into the wooden palace structure. The palace, largely built from timber, was no match for naval artillery designed to crack fortified ships. Zanzibar's artillery fired back. Briefly, one shell struck a British ship but caused no substantial damage. British guns responded with precision and volume. By 9:38 a.m., the palace was in ruins. Fires burned. The Sultan's flag was shot down. In 19th century warfare, a raised flag signaled resistance. When it fell, the message was clear. The fight was over. At 9:40 a.m., the shelling stopped. The total duration was approximately 38 to 45 minutes, depending on the record. That's it. The shortest war in recorded history. The human cost, however, was not brief. Around 500 Zanzibari casualties occurred, killed or wounded, compared to just one lightly injured British sailor. That imbalance tells you everything about the scale of power difference. It was industrial empire versus a regional force still structured around older military systems. Technology had compressed warfare into something brutally efficient. And what about Khalid? He fled. Slipping out the back of the palace grounds, he sought refuge in the German consulate. Germany granted him asylum and eventually smuggled him into the German territory. Within hours, Britain installed a new compliant sultan, Hamad bin Mohammed, who agreed to British terms. The war didn't just end quickly, it achieved its political objective immediately. So why was it so short? Because it wasn't about conquest, it was about control. Britain didn't need to invade territory or mobilize armies across continents. It already had naval dominance in place. 38 minutes, one ultimatum, and 5 warships.